ever, like, completely misread a social situation?
Yeah.
Like, one time, I thought this friend was in a terrible mood. Turned out they were just really enjoying their lunch. Totally oblivious.
Happens to all of us, right?
Totally. But, like, imagine that miscommunication, but way bigger in a family where you've got someone on the autism spectrum and someone with, like, strong narcissistic traits. That's tricky territory.
Oh, yeah. Whole other level.
Right. So that's our deep dive today, this article from Cheap ABA. It breaks down this exact dynamic. And don't let the name fool you. We're not talking discount therapy. This is about the nitty-gritty of how these two very different ways of seeing the world, well, they can clash in a family.
It's not about diagnosing, it's about spotting the behaviors, the impact it has.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
first off, what do we mean by narcissism? It's not just like, oh, they're a bit self-centered.
Right. We're talking more specific traits, like needing constant admiration, real lack of empathy, really struggling to get why other people feel how they do.
And that, the article points out, that's where things get really tough when someone's autistic. How they communicate, it's different. And the narcissist.
They might not get it. The article called it emotional blind spots, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and that lack of awareness, it hits hard. Like the article mentioned a study, parents with those narcissistic tendencies, they often saw their autistic kids' communication attempts as like disobedience, defiance even.
Instead of just a different way of communicating,
Yeah,
which it is.
totally. And that misunderstanding, well, the article says that impacts everything. Daily stuff, like the whole family's emotional well-being, it can get kind of dark.
It can.
It's like those little breakdowns, they snowball into this huge GE thing, right? Like all this hurt just from not getting each other.
Yeah.
And the article, it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, like the real problems that happen in these families.
Yeah, it's more than just, oh, we talk differently. Emotional turmoil, needs getting totally ignored. The article even talks about identity struggles for the person on the spectrum. It's a lot.
And this is what got me, right? That talks about how sometimes the autistic person's needs, totally invisible because the narcissistic parent, they're so busy with their own image. Like the article gave this example. Imagine a family thing, right? Kids having a meltdown, sensory overload.
Which, people listening who know, that's not always obvious to others, how hard that is.
Exactly. But instead of seeing the kid's distress,
Yeah.
the parent, it's like a personal embarrassment to them. My kid's not perfect. How does this make me look?
Which invalidates the kid even more. Oof.
Right. And the article, it quotes this autistic teenager. They said, it's like, my feelings don't matter unless they make my mom look bad. Like, damn.
Yeah, that hits hard. Really shows the emotional toll this takes. But important to remember, it's not like villains and victims here, you know. These are people, each with their own baggage.
So true. Which is why I'm glad the article doesn't just leave us bummed out, right? It talks about what you can do, even when it's this messy.
Yeah, and they're upfront. It's not like, do this, problem solved. It's more like ongoing effort stuff. You got to keep at it.
Where do you even start?
Well, they're big on boundaries, healthy ones, obviously.
Boundaries. Everyone's like, boundaries. But what's that even look like here? It's not about, like, never talking to your family again, right?
Right. The article had this analogy. I loved it. Imagine a fence, not a wall. Fence defines your space, protects you some, but it's not cutting everyone off totally.
Okay, I like that. Fence, not a wall. So for the autistic person, that might be learning to say, hey, I'm overloaded, I need space, even if the other person doesn't always get it.
Exactly. And for the less autistic, but maybe dealing with the narcissism, it's boundaries on their own emotions. Like, how much can I handle? When do I step back for my sanity?
Which makes me think of the next T thing they said,
Yeah.
support. You can't do this alone, right? Like therapy was mentioned, but that's not always easy or the right fit.
Oh, absolutely. And they know that. It's more about, like, building your network, whatever that is. Support groups, that one friend who gets it, even online communities. As long as you feel seen there, you know?
Because feeling understood,
Mm.
that's huge EE in these families where that's lacking, the article said.
It's like the opposite of that constant invalidation. Someone who gets your normal, even if it's not everyone's normal, makes a huge difference.
It's like, okay, bad analogy time, but it's like that lifeline when you're drowning, you know? And speaking of lifelines, they talk about self-care, which, yeah, everyone's saying it, but here, it's not just a luxury.
Yeah, it's not just face masks and spa days, though those help, but it's more like you can't help anyone if you're running on empty yourself.
Right. That airplane thing, put your oxygen mask on first. And that's hard, especially like if you're the one taking care of others.
People forget that. It's not selfish, it's survival. so you can then help others without losing yourself.
So easy to forget yourself in all
Yeah.
this, but that oxygen mask thing, got to remember that.
For sure. And the article, it's like they knew we needed that reminder. Find things that refill your tank, they said.
Yeah.
Could be nature, could be like art, could be just quiet time, whatever works.
Because this IS heavy stuff,
Yeah.
dealing with like the autism ADD narcissism combo in a family, it's work.
Yeah.
It's awareness.
Yeah.
No easy answers. So for someone listening, like, okay, I get it, but where do I even begin? What's the one thing you hope they take away?
If they just walk away remembering this, understanding is huge. Even just recognizing these patterns in your family, at work, wherever, you approach things differently when you get it.
Knowledge is power. Kind of cheesy, but
Yeah. But true. When you understand the narcissism part and how different autistic experience IS, well, you can react with more, I don't know, compassion maybe? Set those boundaries better like we talked about. And D, know when you need help too.
so important. It's not about blaming. It's about everyone understanding each other better.
Right.
Right. And before we wrap up, the article it mentioned this thing kind of briefly, like how society view WS both these things, narcissism and autism. That adds a whole other layer.
Oh, yeah. They just touched on it, but it makes you think, like, what does normal even mean, right? And does that mess with how we treat people on the spectrum? And the stigma, both of them get hit with that, makes it harder to even ask for help sometimes.
It's like we peeled back one layer, but there's a whole onion here, right? A lot to think about.
For sure. And it reminds us, got to keep talking about this stuff, question what we think we know, more understanding, more acceptance for everyone. That's the goal, yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's our deep dive for today, folks. Understanding it's a journey, not a finish line, right? Keep learning, keep asking, and keep those conversations going. Thanks for being here with us.